Good morning to my colleagues and friends in Lawrence, University of Kansas, and good evening to my colleagues and friends here in India. I'm going to present a paper on the legislative measures and its impact on atrocities against the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in India. My name is Dr. S. M. Sirajuddin. I am at the moment working as Senior Research Fellow, Indian Council for Social Science Research, New Delhi, India. Previous to this, I had been the experience of working with various organizations. I started my career earlier. Just to give you a brief background about myself, I worked with the Anthropological Survey of India in different positions. Then later on, I moved to uh, National Planning Commission of India as advisor. Then later on, I moved to Union uh, United Nations Development Program (UNDP). Then later on to World Bank and also to ESAID as advisor. I switched over from anthropological basic research to the policy planning and applied aspects of anthropology after doing my second master's degree in development studies in University of East Anglia, Norwich, UK. Basically, I have got the knowledge of both physical anthropology and then the development anthropology. And at the moment, I am concentrating my focus, and my focus is on the development anthropology. So, connected to this, I was also for a short stint, I had a short stint with the University of Kansas, Lawrence, as a postdoc with a Fulbright scholarship program. This is what Dr. Jairam, Professor Jairam was speaking right now. This is a very good program which gives an opportunity for the international scholars, both from India and from the USA, for the bilateral program, for the visits and for conducting special lectures and for doing also a kind of a small time research and also to have collaborative research with different institutes and with the research scholars. And during my stay at University of Kansas Lawrence, Professor Michael Crawford was developing the DNA lab. I was also there practically in this biological lab of biological anthropology there. And then I had the opportunity of working with Professor Michael Crawford and with his graduate students at that time, now Professor Ravi Dugirala and Professor Rector Arya. I have a paper with Professor Michael Crawford in human biology on my PhD program as a postdoc on the population structure and its relationship with the cognate populations in South India. A Chenchu population is a tribal population in South India, in Andhra Pradesh. This is in connection with this. I can claim that I'm a bit of a kind of a alumni of University of Kansas Lawrence because I spent almost one academic year there, and then it gives me a great pleasure and also a kind of a honor to be associated with this applied anthropology, wild anthropology Congress program. So I would like to share and I would like to pay a small type of a tribute to Professor Michael Crawford, with whom a special session of is being also arranged in his honor. I would like to just share my second slide here. This is, I think I don't know, Professor Michael Crawford is there right at the moment in the Lawrence. This is Michael Crawford and Mrs. Mrs. Crawford, Carol, and myself. I was staying at that time in Applecroft apartment in Lawrence. I hope it is still there. So you can see Professor Michael Crawford, his wife, and this is myself when they visited, where he was kind enough to visit during my stay there in my apartment. This is Crawford and his family at that time. I would also like to share another photograph of Professor Crawford and his graduate students at that time. This is Michael Crawford, and I think this is Professor Blanjaro, and this is Professor Ravi Dugirala with his first son at that time. At that time, a graduation ceremony took place, and then we were happy there. I have been the opportunity of attending the graduation ceremony at that time. When the PhD was awarded to one of his graduate students. This is another picture of Professor Michael Crawford's son. I think his name, if I remember correctly, Kenneth. And this is Professor Ravi Dugirala, and this is Professor Rector Arya during one of our social gatherings at that time. This is also another photograph of the graduate students of Professor Michael Crawford. This is Professor Rector Arya. This is myself. This is a friend and colleague of ours. And this is Professor Ravi Dugirala. This is myself at the time of the University of Kansas Lawrence. And this is, if I remember correctly, this is in front of Howard and Mallet Hall, University of Kansas campus. I hope still these buildings still exist there. So this is just a brief to let the audience and then the scholars to know that my association with University of Kansas Lawrence. In fact, I was planning to come and attend this program in person, and I wanted to combine my visit with the graduation ceremony of my daughter, who is in the University of California, Berkeley. But then, due to some reasons, unforeseen reasons, it didn't materialize, so I could not able to come and present myself personally this paper there. Now, this is the brief about myself and my association with the University of Kansas. Now, coming to the paper which I am going to present, this is a brief background about the paper. So this is the paper which deals about the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in India and their upliftment. In this, there are so many welfare programs are going on, and then one of the best important thing which connected to their upliftment and then their social welfare program is two legislations which have come into existence after India's attainment of independence. There are about roughly 1,258 SC communities in the country, constituting about 16.6% in India. And likewise, there are about 705 ST communities, whom about 75 are called as most vulnerable and particularly vulnerable tribal groups spread over in 30 states, and they constitute about 105 million, and they are about 8.6 of the country's population. Both the SCs and STs constitute about something like 300 millions of India's population. As is known, India's caste system is the world's longest and world's longest surviving social hierarchy, which is estimated about more than 2,000 years old, and it has got the four Varna system called as the Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudras, and within this, again, there are different jatis, castes, and subcastes. And a fifth category outside this Varna system is comes under the outside this Varna system, among whom these scheduled castes and scheduled tribes are categorized. These scheduled castes are also known to be particularly untouchables because they used to practice the polluting practices, vocations like scavenging and then removing carcasses, leather work, etc. And in fact, the scheduled caste during 1931 caste-based census were classed as depressed classes. In 1935, Government of India took out an order and classified these disadvantaged them as caste and scheduled caste. And this Government of India first published this list of scheduled caste in 1936. Then the Constitution of India, which came into effect during 1950, with the architect being Dr. Bhimrao B.R. Ambedkar, has abolished untouchability in this by this constitutional. This is the brief background about the background of the paper, and there are Because of this untouchability and then this segregation of the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes, the government of India has to take proactive and affirmative actions for their bringing them to the mainstream and to bring the equity and justice. And my presentation will be like this: a brief about this Protection of Civil Rights Act, and then the brief about the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Then what is the implementation mechanism, how it is being done at the moment during the last 5 years, because I cannot go back in detail for all the years. So I will concentrate mostly on the last 5 years. Then what are the responsibilities of the states and the UTs? There are about 36 states and union territories in India. Then I will be also reviewing the reports and then the basic data, both the primary and secondary data. But basically, I will not be dealing with it because of the short duration of the time. I will be dealing mostly at a macroscopic level. And then the centrally sponsored scheme, which has been devised by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, how to implement this PCR Act, Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955 and Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. Then I will be discussing briefly the important points and the current status and the impact of these two acts on the SCs and STs and the way forward mechanism. So the PCR Act actually was designed actually in 1950, but then it came into actually in a particular, by the legislation, a Civil Rights Act is known in 1955, and in 1976 these rules were modified and notified during 1977. There are broadly 6 kinds of offenses which used to be committed against these SCs and STs. They are like, prevention of entry to the public worship places, denial of access to public workplaces, shops, entertainment, refusal of admission in hospitals, educational institutions, etc., and refusal to sell goods and services, the molestation and injury, compelling, scavenging, sweeping, etc., that is of the menial jobs. The punishments for this in this legislation and then the rules which have been prescribed for this are, if somebody is perpetuating this type of a offense, that is, the person will be, there will be a cancellation and suspension of license of that institution, then suspension of grants to that particular institution, then punishment for willful neglect of investigation, then imposition of fine, enhanced punishment for subsequent conviction if the same crime is committed. Then there is also rules and regulations for the promotional and general awareness of this Protection of Civil Rights Act and affirmative action. And there are various social welfare programs for the alleviation of poverty, and for this, there are reservations for this for the SCs and STs in the legislatures and employment and educational institutions. And also there are special programs for health and social welfare schemes, and in terms of giving special scholarships and then giving them entrepreneurship, land, and etc. etc. Likewise, in the case of PO Act, why PO Act came into existence when there is a Protection of Civil Rights Act is there? Protection of Civil Rights Act doesn't take care of the offences and then the crimes against these STs. So that's why the government felt the need for this special act, that is the prevention of atrocities against SCs and STs, which came into being in 1999, and then subsequently it was modified regularly for when there are found to be some lacunae there in 2011, 2013, 2014, 2016, and of late at 2018. By expanding the number of atrocities from 22 to 47 categories, like intimidation, kidnapping, acid attack, rape, murder, etc. Then this act also gives the relief amount for these 47 offences of atrocities, and then there is a rationalization of the payment of the relief amount to the victims within 7 days. This enhancement of relief amount also has been has been also enhanced. They up to about from 85,000 rupees to 8.25 lakhs, that is 825,000 rupees, depending upon the nature of the offense. Then completion of investigation on filing of charge sheet within 60 days. So then periodic review of the scheme for the rights and the entitlements of victims by the state, district, and district vigilance committees in their respective meetings. These are some of the important guidelines for this PCR and PO Act. In continuation of this, I can say that there are designated special and district courts are there. Then there are also appointment of special public prosecutors, legal aid cells, then for speedier investigation by high-ranking police officers in time and in time-bound manner, nomination of nodal officers at the states and districts, then delineation of vulnerable ST areas for the atrocity-prone areas and districts in different states and union territories. Then the setting up of monitoring committees at the central, state, and at the federal level, and also at the district level for the SC/ST protection cells for the vigilance and monitoring mechanism. Then the provision of then this is also felt that the relief amount should be given immediately to the beneficiaries or to the kith and kin of the victims. Then this enhancement of amount also has been increased. And for promoting or to avoid this untouchability, intercaste marriages also were promoted, and incentive mechanism of about giving about 2.5 lakhs has been introduced since 2013. And now I would like to briefly present for you some of the cases of this protection of civil rights act violations and both at the police station level and at the court level. First, when a crime is committed, it is to be reported to the police stations and police officer not less than the rank of the deputy superintendent of police has to take interest and to investigate the problem. And then later on, when this charge sheet has been developed and yes, case has to be submitted in the court. First, it is a question of how the case is being handled by the police officers. So during the last 5 years, if you see it, this Protection of Civil Rights Act, the earlier known as the Untouchability Act, if you see it there, during 2017, there were about 78 cases. And then in the case of STs, there are about 7 cases. And then if you come down to the present level during the last 5 years, these have in fact, they are come down. About 50 cases have been reported, and in the case of STs, there are only about 6 cases. And if we see the charge sheeted, there are only 5 in the case of SCs and 4 in the case of STs. The number of cases were pending with the police are, you see, abnormally, it's still high. It is nearly 70% in the case of SCs and about 33% in the case of STs. So, in fact, if we see there, the Untouchability Act actually is not that predominant when compared to the Prevention of Atrocities Act, which we'll see later on. Now, if we see the cases, how these are being handled by the courts, because the police have to file the first information report, FIR, and then they have to lodge a report and then start the process of prosecution. And in the case of the courts, if you see it there, in this PCR Act, Protection of Civil Rights Act, the SCs, there are about 592 cases during 2017, and in the case of STs, they are about 295. But when you come down to the recent levels, they have been consistently increasing from 590 to it has almost doubled in the case of STs, 221, and in the case of STs, they are going on decreasing. So actually, these problems are more acute in the case of the scheduled castes rather than in the scheduled tribes. Well, why? Because mostly they are urbanized, and then in the case of the scheduled tribes, they are isolated. They have their own protection. In the case of the scheduled areas, 5th schedule and 6th schedule areas. Then if we see the number of cases...
Excuse me, Professor.
Yes.
You have 5 more minutes before we have to go to the next speaker.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we see there, then in the case of this recently, the number of cases acquittals are more, and the convictions rate, if you see there, more or less, they're also the same there. So in fact, the conviction rate is very less, and for want of proper data, for proper investigation reports. So that's why there is a number of cases are piling up. And in the case of the protection of prevention of atrocities act, unlike in the previous PCR Act, the cases are almost increasing. In 2017, in the case of SCs, they were about 5,622, and in the case of 56,000, and it has increased to 62,000 in the case recently of late. Same thing in the case of the STs, the atrocities were about 9,000 and they have increased to about 11,000. And in the case of the pending cases with the police, they are about 30% of the cases are in the case of SCs and STs, and they were pending in 2017. And similarly, of late, there is a little decrease of about 26% of the cases, though it has increased the number of cases, but the pending cases are almost like 30% of the cases are still pending. Now, coming to the courts, same thing. I see the conviction rate. I would like to highlight here. More or less, the police cases and the court cases are similar. Here, I would like to highlight that the pending cases are about more than 95% in the case of SCs and STs, even of late. Something like 2,05,000, and then in the case of STs, it is about 35,000 cases are pending. So now, implementation mechanism. You see, though the legislation and the rules and guidelines have been prepared by the center, but the implementation mechanism is being done by the state governments. And then there is a centrally sponsored scheme has been devised for this thing, and almost like about 1,000 crores is being spent for the SC's development. And for this case, in the case of the centrally sponsored scheme, about 100 crores. 1 crore is equal to about, your 10 millions. So these being spent for the upliftment and for the eradication of this PCR Act and the Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989. And then of late recently, there is a national helpline against atrocities has also been introduced, and then manual scavenging has been stopped, and then a mechanized manual scavenging has also been adopted, and these people are being trained how to stop this menial job of scavenging and then menial scavenging work. Then this is about the allocation of funds by the central government. In the case of CSS scheme, if we see there is about 222 crores. I said that 1 crore is equal to 10 millions, and it has increased from 222 crores to 610 crores of late for this scheme. And then there are the persons pending in the courts. We have seen already that 95% of the cases are pending for want of judicial proper scrutiny and for judgment. Intercaste marriages are also on a higher rise. Persons provided incentives for this also amount is increasing, and then the process, these cases registered in the case are also on the increase for this PO Act, Prevention of Atrocities Act. Then if we go through this act, then if we see that the states have also been asked to provide special courts and then special police stations. And in this, I have given the details here. There are also the provision for appointing public prosecutors, even private prosecutors for the crimes to be investigated properly and to file the case and to further the court proceedings for its logical end. Intercaste marriages have been also promoted, but they are not significantly that higher. This CSS centrally sponsored scheme, about 593 crores have been allocated during 20s, and then it has of late increased to about 100 crores. Then what are the reasons for this? The low rate for conviction rate is this like this thing: witnesses and complainants becoming hostile, and absence of proper scrutiny of cases, and then lack of proper prosecution, and then prosecution unable to prove the charges, then long pendency of the trial and witnesses losing interest, and lack of collaborative evidence. Then what is the reason? There is a need for timely furnishing of material by the states and UTs to the state, and then setting up of executive exclusive special courts and regular conduction of meetings at the state and district level. Then well, in general, we can say that more than 90% of the cases registered are pending in the courts over the years. And but of late, there is a little less in now, but only last year due to the COVID situation. And though the centrally sponsored scheme provides about more than 100 crores, but the funds are not released in time, and they have to be released adequately and then in time to the states and the union territories which are implementing this program. Then the police department should take active interest in filing the cases immediately, remove the false cases, and quick investigation should be done, and charge sheet should be filed, and fast track courts should be established. Then investigation officer should complete this investigation within 6 days, 60 days of not below the rank of deputy superintendent of police. Then the Home Secretary at the state level and Social Affairs Secretary should chair the state village monitoring and monitoring meetings so that they can submit the reports to the state central government and for quick action. Then what are the other things which we need for the streamlining this PCR Act and PO Act? We have to provide protection to the witnesses and wages for the transport of to the victims, and then provision of private advocates, and then the training of the public Panchayat Raj institutions for updating and computerization of land records, as most of the disputes relate to the agricultural and land and grazing, etc. Then sensitization of officials dealing with the SCs and STs welfare, and then appointment of special officers in the identified areas, then making necessary provisions in the annual budget for relief and rehabilitation, then constitution of state level vigilance and monitoring committees and its meetings at least twice in a year, then involving NGOs in the field for social service and reach out to help the victims for rendering relief, justice to the victims, and curtailment of crimes and atrocities against SCs and STs. So these are in brief, I have suggested the mechanism, and I would like to thank you for your patience and hearing me, and I will be happy if you have any questions. And thank you very much. And if I have exceeded the time limit, I don't know, because I have not seen my watch. I think I am within my time. Thank you very much once for